Hi there, and welcome back to the World War II Mysteries and Obscurities Iceberg. I know it's been months since I last did one of these, and admittedly, the last time I did it, I wasn't too happy with it because I was too stale. I had a teleprompter that I was reading off of. Everything that I said was coming straight from the fucking source. There wasn't really much of a script. The only thing that was unscripted, and I tried my best to do unscripted, was the Demon Core section. That was the only thing that I tried my best to do completely unscripted. So today we're gonna go back to the old style of completely unscripted, me just having done hours of research and remembering every single thing and going off of that. That's partly a lie. You see, I have really shitty memory, and I've been trying my best for years to be better when it comes to my memory, but lately it's gotten worse. I think I might have Alzheimer's. So because of that, I have a huge stack of papers here with information that I need to know about every single subject that I'm about to talk about today. So if anybody ever says that I'm not dedicated, oh, I'm dedicated as hell. Okay, and this should fucking prove it. So, fuck you. Anyways, let's get into the iceberg today, shall we? Today we're on Tier 4 of the World War II Mysteries and Obscurities Iceberg. It's been a while, so excuse me if it's hard to get back into the shape of things. Starting off, we've got the Manila Massacre. The Japanese people were horrible people during World War II, and this is no different. You see, the Japanese would not only violently mutilate people, they would also rape them, and they had rape centers dedicated to this. In fact, they had the Bayview Hotel, where they would perform mass rapes on civilians of the city of Manila. A lot of these were young women, and when I say young women, I mean from ages of 12 and up. You see, they would take people from schools, from hospitals, just anywhere, and they would rape them, kill them, mutilate them, all kinds of things. They'd even go as far as to taking pregnant women and ripping open their bodies in order to not only just kill them, but kill the child that they had. And remember how I said they used the Bayview Hotel as a mass rape center? They took 400 women from the wealth district of Philippines. I'm pretty sure it's called Amelia. I'll have on screen what it was titled because I'm really bad with my memory, like I said. And they just would take the prettiest person, the prettiest girl, and rape them. Oftentimes they were aged 12 to 14. So, yeah. Horrible atrocity committed by the Japanese people, and a horrible way to start off this tier of the iceberg. Number 2 on the World War II iceberg tier 4. So, Rommel's Gold, something so much happier to talk about, I hope. Johann Erwin Eugene Rommel, if I'm wrong about that, I'll correct it on screen, was a well-known Wehrmacht who went by the nickname of the Desert Fox because he was one of the best tank commanders during the African campaign of World War II. And he, if I remember correctly, worked alongside the African Corps in order to steal a bunch of Jewish gold, and it was 6 crates worth of just gold and silver and a lot of other like priceless artifacts. As for what happened to the gold, nobody knows. Whether it was that he, just found somewhere to dig it up at somewhere to hide it or what, nobody knows. And only as of recent, I believe it was 2017, I might be wrong, might be more recent than that, there was a cipher that was found that could help lead to where the location of this gold might be. Other than that, nobody knows jack shit about this gold, and it's pretty interesting. Moving on. I mean, I don't hate the Polish, I just hate their language, and I hate trying to pronounce these names. Like, what the fuck is Władysław Sarkowski? SIKORSKI? I think it's Sikorsky. So Władysław Sikorski's death. Polish people, chime in the comments and tell me whether I'm fucking stupid or not. WS was the commander-in-chief for the Polish army as well as the prime minister of the Polish government at the time. Now, people assume that WS was assassinated due to his plane crashing in Gibraltar. The story goes as follows. And I'm going to go ahead and at least quote some of the Wikipedia article in order to make sure I get this right and get this accurate. So I do apologize because I know most people really hate seeing somebody look at paper and read off of it, but fuck you. In late May of 1943, Sikorski went to inspect Polish forces stationed in the Middle East. He was inspecting the forces and raising morale of the Polish troops there. He was also occupied with political matters around that time, a conflict growing between him and General Władysław Anders, not to be mistaken with Władysław Sikorski. What? Polish people, why do you have so many names that are so fucking similar? And why are there two people with the same first name competing politically? While returning from the Middle East, Sikorski perished, together with his daughter Zofia, his chief of staff, Kilmecki. Just throw it on the fucking screen. I don't want to pronounce it. And 7 others when his aircraft, a Consolidated Liberator 2, crashed into the sea 16 seconds after takeoff from Gibraltar Airport. A British court had convened in order to investigate the crash. They found that for some reason the elevator controls had been tampered with and weren't working, and because of this, that's what caused the airplane to crash. Elevator controls, as far as I know, are how you control the elevation of. You know, if you're not able to control the elevation of your plane, you know what I mean? That rest in peace. Terrible story. They don't know whether or not the controls were just. I don't control that light. I don't have anything that controlled that light to make that happen just now. So if you saw an increase in brightness, that wasn't me. And that kind of scared the fuck out of me. Anyways, moving back to what I was saying. They don't know how, but they assume that the elevator controls were jammed. And they don't know how they were jammed. But because of this, they assume that's what caused the plane to crash. And the controversy surrounding it is that either the plane was hijacked or that somebody was jamming it and caused it to crash. That they don't, or somebody sabotaged it before the plane took off. But in the end, as I'm pretty sure it was 2009, as recent as 2009, nobody could figure out what the fuck happened. An entire Polish investigation team was set out to figure out what the fuck happened, and even they were just like, well, I don't think he was murdered, but he did die. We don't know what the cause was, other than, I mean, they knew that the elevation controls fucked up. Whether that was just being tampered with or whatnot, who knows? It's a very, very weird story, and the controversy is just surrounding the fact that they don't know how he died or what, and they don't know whether it was sabotage or not, but everybody assumes it was. But, I mean, plane crashes happen all the time. If it were the elevation controls that caused the plane to go down, then that's something that is usually at fault of the people who check the planes before it's ready for takeoff. So nobody really knows the story there, and that's really where most of the speculation lies, is why is it the plane's elevation controls, which are always checked before the plane takes off, failed mid-flight and caused the plane to crash. According to every summary that I could find about No Picnic on Mount Kenya, every single thing that I could find about it has told me that this story follows the attempted escape of 3 Italian POW who made it to Mount Kenya. You're telling me they attempted to escape, but then they did escape and made it to Mount Kenya. Because if you're telling me that they attempted escape, then they didn't escape, right? Or is this just me arguing semantics at this point? The book is actually based off of a true story of the author who is writing the story. And they really are just detailed diary entries about life in a POW camp, as well as the beautiful view of the Mount Kenya, from Mount Kenya, of Mount Kenya. Yeah, you get it. That's the entirety of the story. Moving on. Pearl Harbor ghost planes. Now, you probably hear that and you're like, whoa, another ghost story? Shit, I can't wait to hear this one. You know, I think the last one I talked about was the missing 3,000 or whatever soldiers, like Chinese soldiers that just suddenly fucking disappeared. But this one follows the story of so I couldn't pull up this article because the article is long gone. So if anybody can find a copy of this article, I would love to be able to cite them as my source. But the following article, quoting this article, says the following. It was December the 8th of 1942, and U.S. radar picked up an unidentified plane heading straight for Pearl Harbor from the direction of Japan. Two fighters were instructed to investigate and quickly intercepted the mysterious plane. It was a P-40 fighter of the type used in the defense of Pearl Harbor the year prior, and not used since. What was even stranger was that the plane was bullet-ridden, missing its landing gear, and the pilot could be seen to be covered in blood and slumped forward over his controls. The intercepting pilots claimed that the other pilot waved at them briefly before his P-40 nosedived directly towards the ground and crashed. Rescue crews were dispatched immediately and combed through the wreckage. There was no trace of the pilot. They did recover a diary that indicated the plane was stationed on the island of Mindanao. I tried my best. 1,300 miles away in the Pacific Ocean. If he was a wounded Pearl Harbor defender, how did he survive in a shredded plane for a year? Without landing gear, how did he get his plane off the ground? What happened to his body? This has remained one of the most perplexing mysteries of the war. Here's the best part. One of the most perplexing mysteries of the war, however, it recently came out that the story was completely false, and it was constantly being told in different ways because some person heard it from another person who heard it from another person, and it got telephoned along to the point where a lot of the times the pilot would change to a Japanese pilot, or they would change to an American pilot, or they'd change to a German pilot, or the plane itself would change from a P-40 to a B-27 or whatever the fuck they're called. It would just keep changing over and over again, especially the location. Sometimes it'd be Pearl Harbor, sometimes it'd be somewhere in Japan, and oftentimes it'd even be, I'm pretty sure the last that I read was somewhere in America. I'll throw up on the screen whether I'm right or wrong about that. And all that it boiled down to was, yeah, some dude told this story like it was some horror story, and everybody ran with it. And then there was a book that cites this story from the person who told the story. And that version I just told you is what the original version was. And it although the story was an autobiography of the dude, it was a made up story. He was just telling a tall tale, and it was the first chapter of his fucking book that he tells it in. I don't remember what the name of the book is. I'll throw it up on screen, like I said. Moving forward, the Ghost Army. Now, we just talked about something really interesting, which was a ghost plane, and now we're going to talk about something even more interesting, a ghost army. But this isn't no ghost story. This is a division of the U.S. Army that was given the title the Ghost Army. They were the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Now, what these guys did is fucking impressive. Okay, this was full-on espionage as early as World War II, in the sense that let me start with one of the things that I found the most interesting is they went to Fort Knox, I'm pretty sure, recorded sounds of like gunfight. They recorded sounds of like tanks and airplanes, and after they recorded it, they would play it to German troops over loudspeakers in order to make them go to that area, just so they could distract them to let actual fucking like the actual US Army and whatever go fight the real battle. They would do this just to distract them from the real fucking troops. It's impressive shit that they did. And that's only one fraction of the many cool things that they did. You see, a lot of these people were artists as well. They full on made fake, like they would, these people were artists. They were talented as fuck. They made inflatable tanks, inflatable bases, just to like, I might be wrong about that, but I know there's a picture, I'm gonna show it, of the inflatable tanks that they would make and disguise, just so that way the fucking the Germans would mistake these inflatable tanks for real tanks and shoot at them and waste their time with that, so real tanks could come around and fuck them up. It's really cool shit. A lot of these people, like I said, were artists, but they were also architects and set designers, and they knew their shit. They knew what they were doing. They were the brains of the army. That sounds really, really offensive. What I mean is they did the smart shit. Oh no, that sounds bad too, because then you have to. These people were smart as fuck, and they knew what they were doing in order to deceive the Germans, and it's really impressive shit that they did. And honestly, I think it's the coolest thing so far that I've heard from this iceberg. Another thing that they did was they would get on the radio itself, and they would send fake Morse code messages to deceive the Germans, who would tap into those radio signals to listen to what the US was planning to do next. And they would probably tap into these and be like, oh yeah. Okay, so they're gonna go ahead and they're gonna attack so-and-so. Okay, we'll be there ready for that. But then they go and nobody's fucking there because America's actually somewhere else. Just deceiving all of the Germans. It was impressive. Like I said, I love it. I love the Ghost Army so far. It's probably one of my favorite. If I had a tier list for everything that I talk about in this, the Ghost Army is number one. I'm sorry. So next up, we have why Rudolf Hess went to Scotland. Rudolf Hess was one of the few right-hand men of Hitler, or at least he was at a point. He was a German politician and a well-known leader of the Nazi party. He was deputy Führer to Adolf Hitler. Führer. I've never figured out how the fuck to pronounce that word. Hess decided in 1941 that he was going to fly out to Scotland in order to talk with the Duke of Hamilton for easing tensions between Germany and the UK at the time, if I remember correctly. And he decided that the best person to talk to was this person that he'd never fucking met. And clearly, if I went there and talked with them and negotiated a peace talk, we could get the UK to exit from the Second World War, and it would just make things so much easier for us. You know, we won't have them up our ass. Well, he goes and he talks to the Duke of Hamilton, and the Duke of Hamilton recognizes him, and he says, all right, buddy, you're going into prison. So he's tried for war crimes that the Nazis have committed, and clearly that he's more than likely committed himself. And he's held prisoner for 40 years, if I remember correctly. So I was going to say several decades, but he was held prisoner for 40 years up until 1987 when he killed himself in prison. So, yeah. Moving on, the ghost blimp. I know, another ghost in the title. Can you believe it? How many fucking ghosts do we have this entire fucking iceberg? I promise you the ghost blimp is the last on this tier. I don't know about any other tiers. I don't know about the whole iceberg, but this is the last of this tier. So let's just get on with it, shall we? Now, when I say that they mysteriously disappeared over the Pacific Ocean, what I mean is the crew themselves mysteriously disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. You see, what had happened is, I believe, the crew lifted off of Treasure Island, began their journey spotted an oil slick in the Pacific Ocean, and according to sources, they spotted the oil slick, circled around it while slowly descending, and then at around, so this was around 7 a.m. that they saw the oil slick and circled around it, and around 11:30 a.m., the blimp reappeared approaching the surface, approaching the beach. And fishermen spotted it approaching the beach and attempted to help it land. Well, when they looked inside the gondola, they noticed that nobody was inside the fucking blimp. No crew whatsoever were inside the blimp. So mysteriously, between that oil slick and between the blimp coming back to the beach, I guess the crew probably jumped out of the blimp or something, like mayday, mayday, who knows, and just vanished. None of their bodies have been recovered whatsoever. So an entire search and rescue team was sent out to that small area to try and find what had happened, but nobody can find anything. No remains, no nothing. The blimp came back all by itself. And that, to me, is by far the craziest part about it. And that's why this is titled The Ghost Blimp. And the craziest thing about it, too, is that the parachutes and the lifeboats were still on the gondola. Meaning if they did abort the blimp, if they did abort the blimp, then why didn't they take the parachutes or the lifeboat? Why would they just leave without it? Unless they were pushed out. And if they were pushed out, why wasn't the person who pushed them out with them? Unless he decided to also jump out. And if he jumped out, why didn't he take a parachute or a lifeboat? Who knows? Nobody fucking knows. The entire thing doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever. And that is truly one of the scariest fucking stories. Because could you imagine going and with a crew of like, yeah, DeWitt Cody, age 27, and his co-pilot, Ensign Charles Adams, age 35. It was just those two people. And they just vanished. I think that's terrifying. Anyways, moving on from a genuine, like that's kind of a ghost story, like a genuine ghost story. Moving on from that is Glenn Miller's disappearance. Glenn Miller was an American big band composer, producer, and a trombone player. Now, Glenn Miller was also part of the U.S. Army Air Force. And Glenn Miller had a flight that he was supposed to go out to France on December 15th of 1944. However, on December 15th of 1944, Glenn Miller would disappear. So what happened? Well, on December 11th, Glenn Miller had a flight that he was supposed to go on to France of December 15th, but it got delayed. And it kept getting delayed until the point where Glenn had phone called one of his friends and found out that somebody he knew was also flying out to France that same day that he was supposed to fly out to France on his own private airplane, and decided, well, shit, if he's going and he's in the same place as I am and we're both going to France, I'll go with him. So they go on this flight. Glenn doesn't inform anybody that he's going on this flight, even though he is ordered to do so. He's not allowed to go on casual flights, but he decides, man, fuck it, I don't gotta tell anybody. So he goes on this flight. The plane goes missing somewhere somewhere in the middle of the ocean, and sure enough, they're just like, well, he's missing in action. Somebody who is dating his sister or his cousin, I don't remember exactly, married to, is like, well, I've got a close relation, so I'm going to send out troops to go looking for him. They go out and they look for him, and well, he's declared dead. All three of them are declared dead. Meanwhile, despite Miller's unit being just a little bit late to their deadline of December 15th, they all made it safely to their destination in France, rubbing salt into the wound. Rest in peace, Glenn Miller. And this is just a story of don't be impatient. You know what I mean? Wait it out, or, something bad could fucking happen. Next up on the list, which is something way less depressing, is something just so stupid. But Liberty steaks, better known as hamburgers. You see, because hamburger sounds very German, the Americans decided that, ooh, we don't want to associate with the Germans because they're fucking Nazis. Let's go ahead and let's rename it from hamburger to Liberty Steaks. And sure enough, they changed the name to Liberty Steaks. It didn't stick around very long because that sounds stupid. Hey, you want to go ahead and have a barbecue? I'm going to have some Liberty Steaks. Oh, that sounds really awesome. You know, my wife made some fantastic Liberty waffles this morning. They were great. By the way, the Americans have always done this. It's very typical for us to be like, ooh, we don't associate with you. Ugh. French fries? Liberty fries. Why not? Fuck it. God. All because they opposed the invasion of Israel. Crazy that they would oppose that. Whoa. We had a fun one just now, but we're going back into being depressing. And I'm sorry because this one is really just, it's fucked up. Just fucked up. Joseph Mengele and twins. Mengele, it's the best you're going to get from me for pronouncing it. I tried my best. Joseph was one of the head scientists in the Nazi Party, very close with Hitler himself. You see, Mengele believed that twins held the key to... He believed that twins held the secret to hereditary, okay? He believed that by conducting experiments on twins, he can figure out how to solidify having a race of Aryans forever. And he thought twins were the best way to figure it out. Because, I mean, what are the genes that cause twins to look the exact same? It's wild, it's weird, it's crazy. So if I can figure out what that is all about, I can figure out how to always have somebody who has blonde hair and blue eyes, never mix it. Yeah, it's a great idea. So Joseph Mengele decided that he was going to experiment on twin children. But you see, the thing is that the children they were never like treated so poorly by Joseph as far as they were all aware. You see, they would call him Uncle Joseph. They were very friendly with Mengele, despite the things that he was doing to them. So let's go ahead and get into the list of the things that he did, shall we? This is where it gets really fucked up. And again, I am so sorry. A lot of it was actually not so bad. You see, Joseph Mengele would every single day draw blood from these children, from these twins. That's not so bad, right? But then he would also experiment. Whoa, sorry. He would also take their measurements every single day. You know, their weight, their height, all of that. You know, that's normal stuff. But then he would start with blood transfusions, and then next thing you know, he was trying to figure out how to make all of them have blue eyes. So what he would do with some of them is he would take injections of blue dye and put it in their eyes in order to make sure that they had blue eyes. And you know, a lot of this would lead to permanent blindness. He would oftentimes give them shots of diseases into their backs, like into their spines and their spinal taps, and he would give them like typhus and tuberculosis. And as for why he did it, I don't know. Oftentimes, if one of the twins happened to die of the disease, he would kill the other to see what the effects of the disease were. I try to have a smile to like not be so fucking like show that I'm disgusted by all this, but obviously who the fuck wouldn't be disgusted by this, because it's just fucked up to do. Oftentimes, without putting any of them under any anesthesia, he would perform surgeries on them, which would vary from castration, amputation, and just outright removing their organs. Oftentimes he would even inject the twins with chloroform or phenol, which would immediately cause death. And so he would take the blood samples of these and send it to another scientist in order to have tests run on them. And it's fucking horrible. It's awful. Like he'd stab them in the heart with a big needle of these it's horrific shit. So Joseph Mengele loved twins because he thought that they held some fucking secret that would keep the Aryan race going, and it's just disgusting. It's disturbing to think about. So moving on to something else, shall we? The Aleutian or Aleutian, I'm gonna go with Aleutian for now. The Aleutian Island campaign was essentially the very first time in U.S. history, and even to this very day, well, no, because you have to take in mind the 9/11 attacks. Anyways, was the first time in 150 years that a war had been fought on American soil. You see, the Japanese had invaded Alaska. Yeah. But they lost because it was so foggy, and the Americans knew that it was going to happen, and so they fought back. And because of this, it's so interesting because that's how it starts, is that the Japanese try to attack the Americans, but because the Americans had already intercepted the Japanese the Japanese radios, they predicted it. Well, they knew it was going to go. They knew it was going to happen, and just waited for it to finally happen. And then the Japanese picked like the worst fucking time for it to happen because it was foggy as shit, and they got their asses handed to them. Well, in the very end of it, the Americans try to take over one of the Japanese islands, one of the Aleutian Islands, which is pretty close to Japan if I remember correctly. I might be wrong. I'll show a map. Actually, let me look it up. And the Japanese attacked the Aleutian Islands because they believed that if they controlled the Aleutian Islands, it would keep America from being able to ally with the Russians. Or, sorry, I mean the Soviets. Because of this, a lot of Americans were afraid that the Japanese would attack other parts of America, such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, really just California. Please fucking attack California. Seattle and other parts of the West Coast. The Japanese had actually stationed themselves on one of the islands, Attu. And because, again, this is so much, like this is about 4 pages here, I'm going to go ahead and read from the Wikipedia article about it because this is super interesting and I have really bad memory, but I'm trying my best here. Following 2 aircraft carrier-based attacks on the American naval base at Dutch Harbor, the Imperial Japanese Navy occupied the islands of Attu and Kiska. A battle to reclaim Attu was launched on 11th of May 1943 and completed after a final Japanese banzai charge on the 29th of May. On the 15th of August 1943, an invasion force landed on Kiska in the wake of a sustained 3-week barrage, only to discover that the Japanese had withdrawn from the island on the 29th of July. The campaign was known as the Forgotten Battle because it has been overshadowed by other events in the war that are far more important. Even though the Japanese could have possibly been just a little bit successful to attack the US on their home ground, or at least been a little bit successful on attacking the Aleutian Islands, they weren't because, like I said previously, they picked a horrible day to do it because it was foggy and it was hard to see because of visibility. I dropped my papers, let's ignore that. And the reason I have these papers is to tell you one of my favorite parts about it. You see, only half of the striking force reached their objective. The rest either became lost in the fog and darkness and crashed into the sea, or returned to their carriers. 17 Japanese planes found the naval base, the first arriving at 5:45. As the Japanese pilots looked for targets to engage, they came under intense anti-aircraft fire and soon found themselves confronted by 11th Air Force fighters sent from Fort Glenn. Startled by the American response, the Japanese quickly released their bombs, made a cursory strafing run, and left to return to their carriers. As a result, they did little damage to the base. So can you fucking imagine that? You're like, all right, we're gonna fucking attack you and we're gonna win. And I can't see anything, guys. Next thing you know, fucking Bobby next to you fucking flies right into the ground. Everybody's dying. They're all, and just a couple of the airplanes that do end up finding the base are like, oh, and they're dead. And they're gone. They've been hit by anti-aircraft bullets. Like, that's insane. They had an attempt and they could have been successful, but they were fucking stupid about it. And to be fair, Americans did intercept the naval radios and found out that they were going to do it regardless. And so because of this, they would have been unsuccessful, regardless of the day that they picked. But they would have had at least a little bit of a better chance instead of just having only 2 planes be able to attack. That's not even the worst part. Now, remember, like I said, the Japanese had actually taken over Attu and Kiska, and because of this, they were stationed there. So, what did the Americans do? Well, they bombed the shit out of both Attu and Kiska to kind of get the Japanese to back the fuck off. Well, they had been bombing for several days, just these 2 islands, until they decided, well, we don't see the Japanese leaving whatsoever, so let's go ahead and invade our 2 islands to get them back. And as they entered the island to invade it and, fight the Japanese, they found, that's strange. There's no Japanese here. In fact, there's nobody here. So for several days, they had just been bombing the fuck out of the island, but nobody was there. Not a single person was on Kiska Island. So they'd been bombing nothing for fucking no reason. The Japanese had pretty much just left the island because they were like, oh, fuck, we're probably going to lose this. We're stupid. Let's get the fuck out of here. And so the Americans got on the island, found nothing, and left. Here's the best part, though, is not only did they get on this island and find that there was nobody there, they had deaths occur on this island. Now, what could possibly have caused them to die if nobody was there? Although the Japanese troops had been gone, Allied casualties on Kiska numbered 313. They were the result of friendly fire, booby traps, disease, mines, timed bombs set by the Japanese, and vehicle accidents, or even frostbite. So, despite the fact that they had essentially won, they still ended up with casualties because they weren't prepared for the weather. And not only were they not prepared for the weather, the Japanese had set booby traps in case the Americans did invade, but forgot to disarm any of the booby traps. Well, I imagine they didn't really forget to disarm. They were probably just like, yeah, they'll fucking come back here. And so they set off a lot of the booby traps and fucking died because of it. So, yeah, that's the Aleutian Island campaign for you. A funny day in history, if you ask me. Because at the end of it, who really fucking won? Because it kind of feels like feels like a tie. Yes, the Americans got their islands back, but at what cost? Nothing really of interest happened. Next up is Panzer chocolate, or tank chocolate. This one's really interesting. You see, I think I talked about it in the first part of this iceberg. I might be wrong, but the Germans had a thing for methamphetamines. So Panzerschokoladen, or like I said, tanker chocolate, is essentially just chocolate with meth in it. Because the Blitzkrieg really relied on being fast. You know, Blitzkrieg, it's fast, it's in your face, it's quick. So what's faster than being on meth? So of course they put meth in fucking chocolate, and that's it. That's tank chocolate for you. That's all it's all about. I'm absolutely going to butcher this like I have butchered everything else in the past. And it's so funny because this is something that comes from the British. Project HABAKKUK. Project HABAKKUK was essentially the British's plan to make the biggest aircraft carrier imaginable, not made out of, the normal stuff that they make boats out of, which is, I don't think it's aluminum. I don't know what the fuck boats are made out of, but instead of making it out of that stuff or even wood, they had something else as an idea. Pikeite. think that's how you pronounce it, which is essentially just a mix of wood and ice. And they had intended to use it against the Germans in the Pacific Ocean. Now, I know what you're wondering. Wood and ice, wouldn't that fucking melt? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you make a fucking boat out of all of that? That's dumb. That's stupid. Well, I mean, clearly it is dumb and stupid because they never actually went through with it. But let's understand why this was their decision. You see, most boats that are made out of the normal stuff that we make boats out of, which I'll put up here so that way I'm not the most, so I don't sound really stupid, but I do. Most boats get shot up and they have bullet holes in them, and it's awful, it's terrible, they sink because of it, yada yada. You know, sometimes they get holes blown in them by like artillery, right? Well, they decided that what if we use picrite? Because picrite pretty much indestructible, right? And to really push this idea that picrite is indestructible, they took wood, ice, and then picrite and shot each one, like a block of each. The wood fucking obliterated. The ice, it shattered. But the picrite, the bullet bounced off the picrite, ricocheting through the room. So that sounds pretty good to me. I'd use that for an entire boat. By the way, the boat was going to be way bigger than the fucking USS Lexington, which is fucking huge, by the way. So it was going to be one of the biggest naval air bases ever created. Well, it never went through because, I mean, picrite is pretty fucking expensive to work with, surprisingly, and it's not easy to come by. The Québécois Rambo. Leo Major was Leo Major, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he was a member of the British Commonwealth and was part of the Canadian Army, if I'm not mistaken. You see, he was there during the invasion of Normandy, and on D-Day, he had actually managed to capture a German half-track all by himself. The very next day, Leo had actually run into an SS patrol officer and shot him, shot a couple of other SS that were with him, but not before one had set off a grenade, causing Leo to lose one of his eyes. Now, despite losing one of his eyes, he still thought, fuck it, I can be a scout and a sniper, so I only need one eye to scope my gun. What a fucking badass. He first managed to capture a German officer and then managed to capture the German officer's entire company, which totaled around 100 fucking people. All by himself, by the way. Later, in August of 1945, he was helping load corpses from a destroyed tank into a carrier. And then, when he was in the carrier and they were driving, they drove over a landmine and they blew up the vehicle, obviously, and everybody except for Leo fucking died. Leo remembers hearing a loud blast before he was thrown out of the vehicle and knocked unconscious. So, the Allied forces had actually planned to bomb the city of Zwolle. Now, Major didn't want to see an entire city destroyed again, so him and Arsenal set out, and they decided that they were going to capture the city by themselves. Arsenal dies. Major is frustrated by this, calms himself down, and then proceeds to fire at the German officers who had killed him, kills a couple, the rest flee, and then this is the part that isn't very well known. You see, a lot of the sources kind of have some contradictions here and there, and Major himself even contradicts the story a couple of times, so nobody really knows exactly what happened. But what is known is that Major walked into the city, and the Germans fled after several hours, obviously. And then Major left the city with Arsenal's body in hand and returned home. So nobody knows exactly what happened between that time, within those hours, but whatever it is that Major did, it fucking worked. And it got all of the Nazis in that city to fucking flee. And so he's a fucking badass, whatever he did do. Pete Ellis predictions. Now, this isn't some kind of Nostradamus type shit. I mean, just a little bit, but it's not that severe. You see, essentially, Pete Ellis predicted how World War II was going to be fought, and he predicted that the Japanese were going to be involved in some kind of way. And yeah, that's as much as I can figure out. Now, the reason why I can't figure out more is because all of these predictions of his are in a book. Okay, I'm not gonna go out of my way to buy a book just to do some more research for this fucking video, okay? I do a lot of research as is, but I'm not gonna go out of my way and purchase a book just to find out more. No, I'm good. But all you gotta know is that he supposedly predicted how the war was going to be fought, which isn't so hard. No, it's pretty hard. I couldn't fucking tell you how. And he predicted that Japanese were going to be involved in some way, which that's not that hard, especially given how World War I was going. Nazi wood base. Now, I don't know what it is the author meant by that, to be honest, and I did a lot of research. I found a lot of Nazi wood bases. But what I assume the author is talking about with Nazi wood base is the fact that the Nazis created, just like how I was talking about the Ghost Army earlier, by the way, the Nazis found out about this and decided, well, we could do the same thing. So they made an entire airstrip made out of wood, an entire airfield made out of wood. Now, here's the funny part about it, right? Is the Nazis made this airfield completely out of wood, but they talked about over the radio that they were going to do this, and the Americans intercepted it, found out that they were going to do this, and had enough time to prepare their own wooden bomb to drop on this said wooden base. So you know, they were kind of just like, oh, you think you're funny? You think that's gonna get us? Okay, we know what we can do. And they dropped this giant wooden bomb on them just to fuck with them. As far as I know, that's what Nazi wood base is about. So this one's actually pretty funny. Camp Siegfried was essentially just a camp, a Nazi camp. And when I say camp, I mean like it was a summer camp that taught Nazi ideology in America. And it just so happened that this Nazi summer camp was in New York, of all places. So I don't know how that happened, why that happened, and how it was that it went, how it was that they allowed that summer camp to get away with being there for so fucking long. According to the Washington Post, by the way, Camp Siegfried existed because it was there to raise the future leaders of America and make sure that they were steeped in Nazi ideals. What the fuck? In fact, it was actually reported that 40,000 members attended this. By the way, New York is very heavy in the Jewish population. The camp had actually started in the 1930s. It doesn't really say how long it had been around, but in 1938, a court had pretty much said, yeah, you can't do that. We had something in the 20s with the Ku Klux Klan. It was a court case to keep the Ku Klux Klan under control, or pretty much keep them from being able to be public. So they said, yeah, that's the same thing here. So if you want a comparison between the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan, there you go. A court quite literally compared them. So Willi Herold is a perfect example of I lied on my fucking resume. Because holy shit, let me go ahead and just read you an excerpt from the Wikipedia article so you understand. And I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from the Wikipedia article just so you understand how much this motherfucker had to have lied on his resume in order to get away with some of the shit that he did, okay? Willi Herold, also known as the executioner of Emsland, was a German war criminal. Near the end of World War II in Europe, Herold deserted from the German army and, posing as a Luftwaffe captain, organized the mass execution of German army deserters held at a prison camp. This motherfucker literally started as a paratrooper only because of his physical, his physical appearance and how athletic he was. So all he was a stupid fucking paratrooper. I'm sorry to any paratroopers still out there, but that's all he was. He wasn't anything important. Again, sorry to any paratrooper out there. However, he got completely deserted by his own unit. and he was left to travel all by himself. And while he was traveling by himself, he spotted a shot-up Wehrmacht car, and within that shot-up Wehrmacht car, he spotted a Luftwaffe captain and his uniform. And he decided, I have an idea. So he stole the uniform and pretended to be, and I quote, Captain Herold of the 6th Parachute Division. And what's really hilarious is that he decided he was going to go around telling people that he was on a special mission from the Führer, from Hitler himself. And only a couple times did people ever go, can you prove that? Can you prove that you're like a higher up official? I imagine most of the time he would say this to people and they go, oh, good. Sorry, sir. This video is not going to be able to be seen anywhere in Germany because of that, and I apologize. He managed to recruit 12 prisoners and kept them as bodyguards while he continued his mission from the Führer. Herold recruited 12 prisoners and converted them into his bodyguards. They traveled north, terrifying the populace as they went from town to town. They executed 5 Dutchmen accused of espionage after removing them from a nearby prison, making them dig their own graves and hanging a farmer who had flown a white flag. Which, by the way, means that he was surrendering, in case you didn't know. He was swiftly captured and jailed for this immediately after I believe immediately after or before? Okay. He was swiftly captured for this, and he was captured hours before Hitler's death, which is really funny because how are you going to confirm that he was on a mission from the Führer if the Führer is dead? Him and his men were later taken into custody. And an investigation later on found that within that prison, he had killed over 195 people. And in 1946, he was tried for the death of 111 people. It's a hell of a fucking KDA if you ask me. So yeah, essentially Willi Herold went around claiming that he was someone he wasn't, and because of that, he managed to manipulate his way into the deaths of 195 people within a prison camp. All because he just decided he wanted to. All because he was bored with his life, I guess, and was just like, man, fuck it. I'm gonna take up the mantle of being somebody I'm not, who's a higher up official, and just fucking go out there and kill German deserters. Who knows? Who knows what his reasoning was? Either way, pretty interesting that you can just go around claiming you're someone you're not and be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of people. The dissolving Nobel Prizes. Now this one is pretty fucking funny. Essentially, the people who got Nobel Prizes that were Nazis, well, clearly people who give out Nobel Prizes aren't gonna be like, right, they're Nazis. Oh, they can keep their Nobel Prizes. Here you go, guys. They'd be like, right, we rewarded Nazis with Nobel Prizes. So they decided to melt down the prizes for gold. Yeah, that's really all there is to it. They just melted down the Nobel Peace Prizes that were supposed to go to certain Nazis. Edward Bloch was a... where was I? Oh, right. Edward Bloch, okay? Or Edward Bloch. I'm not entirely sure. Edward Bloch, maybe. Who knows? I mean, there are people who will know, and I hope that they correct me in the comments and tell me that I was wrong about my pronunciation. Anyways, moving forward. Edward was the family doctor of Adolf Hitler's family. You see, despite being an Austrian Jew, he was tending to Adolf Hitler's mother, Clara, who had breast cancer. While he was tending to her, he would sometimes bill them at a discount or just not bill them at all because he was nice. He was a kind person. Adolf Hitler proceeded to keep him around because of this, because he was tending to his mother. And because he was an Austrian Jew, you know, you'd expect Hitler to still fucking hate him, but instead, because of the fact that he was always the family doctor, Hitler treated him like family. Which is insane to hear, right? I know, like, fucking Hitler of all people had fucking, like, some kind of moral, like, standard, whatever. Hitler treated him like family, and because he treated him like family, he got a lot of benefits from that. He was probably one of the only Jews that could manage to get an escort from the Wehrmacht, and it's insane. He was probably the only person who was Jewish who was able to immigrate to the United States without any interference from authorities whatsoever. Like, literally, the Third Reich was just like, yeah, go for it. Go ahead. Immigrate. Here's 16 Reichsmarks. The blokes were allowed to take the equivalent of 16 Reichsmark when most Jews were only allowed to take 10. Edward Bloch would later pass away due to stomach cancer a month after Hitler's death. The Black Book. Not to be mistaken with Epstein's Black Book. The Black Book was essentially just the Germans, when they wanted to invade Britain, they had a list of the special residents of Great Britain that they thought were persons of interest to arrest. That's really all there is to it. It was just people that they thought were necessary to be arrested for certain reasons. Moving on from that, we have the KOCO, which is the Japanese death ray that they developed but never actually used, as pretty obvious. Essentially, it was just a bunch of radio waves, not microwaves, because those are radioactive and nobody knew what the fuck that was yet. Anyways, it was micro radio waves that they would use, or that they would make in a magnetron, which is a huge fucking magnet, in order to take down planes, cars. I think they said that they wanted it to cause humans to combust. I don't know, but they tested it on a lot of animals and learned that it could. I guess the radio waves would cause essentially all of the tests that they would run. They ran on monkeys, groundhogs, rabbits, mice. After all of those experiments, they finally had a prototype of the KOCO, and when they went to go test it on a rabbit, it took about 10 minutes for the rabbit to die. And then when they tested it on a groundhog, it took about 30 minutes for the groundhog to die. And I guess they realized, well, shit, this isn't as successful as we had expected it to be. And they couldn't find any monkeys to test on, so they just gave up. That was it. And they never went through with it. The bombings of Malmo and Lund, which are fucking Swedish words. If I mispronounce that, my bad. I don't really care. The only good thing about Sweden is essentially the British accidentally bombed the Swedish when they were intending to bomb the Germans. And thankfully, with these bombings, nobody was really killed. Some people were injured. They dropped 50 bombs, but I guess they were the weakest bombs that they had. But immediately after the bombing, Britain was just like, we don't know what that's about. We didn't do that. Although after a lot of investigation, they found that the British were responsible, and the British eventually were like, yeah, we did that. That's our bad. We meant for Stettin, which is like miles away from Sweden. Helmut Oberlander. Helmut Oberlander? I don't know. Fuck, I hate German names. Helmut Oberlander. I'm just going to call him H.O. We're going to call him Ho. Essentially, he was the interpreter for the Sonderkommando, which was one of the Nazis' biggest death squads. And all he was just a simple interpreter, but, you know, he's still part of the Nazis. And really, because of that, they tried so very hard, and by they, I mean the government of Canada tried very, very hard to take away his citizenship because of the fact that he was part of these war crimes, even though he probably didn't do anything himself. It wasn't until 2017 when they found it reasonable to strip away his citizenship, and then in 2019 the courts pretty much said, no, that was wrong of us. Here's your citizenship. We're so sorry. But it didn't matter because he died like a couple years after that. So, you know, he was in the courts for several decades of his life, since World War II, all because of the fact that he simply was an interpreter for the Soldier Commando, despite being a part of Canadian citizenship. Adolf Hitler himself really was fascinated with the idea of New York City in flames. So much so that he wanted to make a plane that could fly all the way from Germany, all the way to New York City, and then all the way back to Germany within one round trip. No stops, which is fucking impossible, but that's what he wanted. So they devised plans on how it was they were going to do this. They used B-24s, they used ME-264s and Ju-390s, which are based off the Ju-290s. If I knew anything about planes, this would make a whole lot of fucking sense. So anybody who does know about planes, this will make sense too. In the end, they found that they really couldn't make any engine work for that kind of round trip. So it was completely scrapped. And that's probably why Hitler killed himself. Coco Chanel was a spy. This is a very popular theory. If you're a woman, you know. If you're a man with a girlfriend, you might know what Chanel is. It's a very, very popular brand. Well, Coco Chanel, who was born August of 1883, was a French citizen who was also a fashion designer and a businesswoman. Wow. Coco Chanel actually lived in Paris during World War II and later became an intelligence operative for the Nazi Party. And you want to know why? It's because she was in a romantic relationship with a high-ranking Nazi official. Very, very cool story. And I'm pretty sure people still will use Chanel products. The Germans found that anybody who was not Jewish and sleeping with somebody who wasn't of Aryan descent needed to have their heads shaved as a symbolism that they were not keeping the Aryan bloodline. So Ugly Carnival was essentially just a bunch of women with their heads shaved. The hardest thing about doing icebergs is sometimes they will tell you this is a subject, but they won't tell you anything else about the subject, and you kind of have to, I mean, obviously the point is you need to go digging deep to figure out what it is that they mean by what they said. So when I read P514 Crash, I spent a good while trying to figure out what exactly they meant. But I stumbled upon a story that I'm pretty sure is exactly what they're talking about. And it really, it's another one of those stupid stories that I'm surprised ever fucking happened, and I don't hear about more often because it just shows the ignorance of most of the army and navy and military, just all of the above. So, without further ado, the P514 was a submarine, a British submarine, that one night was submerging in Newfoundland, and nobody had known that this new British submarine was coming back to the land, and they thought it was a German U-boat. So as soon as they saw it, they shot that shit, and then they were just like, then it surfaces, and they notice that it's not a German U-boat. Let me go ahead and read it so I'm not retarded. According to this one article, which I will link in the description because I am stupid and I keep forgetting to put my sources here. In early summer of 1942, the waters of Atlantic Canada were crawling with deadly German U-boats. By April 1942, underwater German killers had sunk 198 ships, most of them supply vessels carrying well over 1 million tons of supplies for the war effort in Europe. In June, in the middle of the night, with heavy fog, the Canadian Bangor-class HMCS Georgian sat just off Newfoundland's Avalon Peninsula, waiting to escort a convoy bound for Sydney. Suddenly, the unmistakable outline of a submarine emerged from the fog bank ahead. Split-second decisions were required. The Canadian commander quickly ordered that a a message be sent to try to identify the vessel. Nobody responded. And because of this, they thought it was just a German U-boat, and so they rammed into the side of it, causing it to sink to the bottom of the ocean. What the fuck? Did you not just see it get brighter? And so, the submarine sank to the bottom of the ocean. Mission accomplished, boys. Let's go home. Until they found out a week later, when one of the bodies washed ashore, that it was actually the British, when they found somebody in a British submariner's outfit. 45 total people were on that submarine when it sank to the bottom of the ocean. And it's another story about the British's incompetency, and it just fucking sucks to know that really, had they communicated in any way that they were coming back, nobody would have freaked the fuck out and thought that's a German U-boat and shot it. No one will ever know to this very day why it is nobody ever responded, because they all fucking died. The iceberg says Operation Vegetation, but I can't find anything on Operation Vegetation, and I can only find something on Operation Vegetarian. So whether that's the same thing or not, I have absolutely no idea. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about Operation Vegetarian anyways, because this might be what they meant and it's just a typo. The plan goes the operation goes like this. The British decide that they're going to make linseed cakes and lace it with anthrax, feed it to cattle, and then the cattle will die, be used for Liberty steaks, and then the Germans will eat the Liberty steaks, and then they'll die. That's it. That's the operation in its entirety. That is all you need to know about it. That was their fucking plan. It didn't work, obviously, and it didn't work because it never went through. They never went through with it because it's a stupid fucking plan. And I don't know if that was what he meant, but that was all I could find. So anyways, that's all. And I know, it's been weeks, it's been months since I last uploaded an iceberg video. And like I said in the very beginning, I didn't quite like how that iceberg video turned out. It was just too monotone. It was too robotic. And this is what I like to be able to do, is I like to be able to film a video and put all of my fucking, all of my Amadusi into it. I like to put everything I have into it. I like to be able to do hours of research, which is why it takes months sometimes for me to upload these videos, because I'm spending all those months doing research. And while I'm doing the research, I'm also working a full-time job. And because of the fact that there's so much that you have to research for these fucking things, I don't really get a whole lot of time to sit down, research, and also make other content at the exact same time. But going forward, I'm going to try to put I already said this before in another video, I'm going to try and put as much time as I can into specifically this iceberg and researching everything and finally finishing this fucking iceberg. So, with all that out of the way, if you liked it, please like the video, please subscribe, because I know you want to see more. If you want to see the end of this iceberg, who knows, that'll probably be like another year down the line. Yeah, that's really all there is to it. Fuck, I hate doing these outros. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video or some shit. Hopefully it'll be the iceberg. If not, sue me.